The wind whipped through the glen with an unearthly fury, echoing the ancestral rage, fueling the battle raging below. For centuries, the rocky crags of the Highlands had served as the stage for the violent feud between the warring clans of Dunmore and Kilgarry. On this day, the worn stones bore witness yet again as their warriors clashed in a dance as old as the land itself. Steel sang against steel, sounding a cadence for the battle cries and curses that filled the chill autumn air. Blood soaked into the rocky soil, feeding the ancient grudges that drove the two sides with primal fervor. This was not merely war. This was retribution. In the mists of the churning chaos stood two figures, a bulwark against the rising tide of violence through the mystic arts passed down by their druid forebears. On the Kilgarry side fought Ailsa, her slender frame belying an iron will. She raised her oaken staff to the brooding skies, calling upon the gale-force winds that came at her command. Golden hair streamed behind her like a war banner, as she urged the winds to batter back the Dunmore attackers. She wore no armour, save a torque of hammered gold inscribed with druidic runes. Woad dye marked her pale skin with sigils of protection along her arms and face. Across the field, Bran's cobalt eyes locked with hers briefly before the Dunmore warrior returned his attention to driving his sword into the chest of a Kilgarry fighter. Though skilled in battle, Bran's true power lay in his druid spells, used to bolster his clan's warriors and heal their wounded. The clans might be enemies, but the druid's code demanded they use their gifts to try and balance the endless bloodshed. As dusk fell across the bloodied battleground, an uneasy quiet settled over the Highlands. The warriors of Clan Dunmore had retreated back to their stone fortress, though victory had been snatched from their grasp once again. Across the glen, Clan Kilgarry's fighters nursed their wounds behind their carnivorous castle walls, bolstered by fending off their hated foes. As night crept over the land, strange events began to unfold. Guards stationed at Dunmore's gatehouse cried out in alarm as shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. Battle warriors approached, their soot-stained plaids marking them unmistakably as deceased clansmen back from the dead. Horns blared across the battlements, summoning warriors still streaked with the grime of war. Disbelieving eyes confirmed the impossible, as scores of their dead kinsmen shambled into view beneath the cold moonlight. The dead uttered not a sound as they drifted towards their former home, showing no signs of aggression. Yet unease gripped hardened warriors who now made their way for the dead to pass. Across the glen, the very same scene was unfolding at Castle Kilgarry. Guards stood dumbfounded as fallen warriors, women and elders emerged from night's shadow to file past them in chilling silence. These were not mere ghosts. The shapes of the dead felt solid and permanent against those still living. Like a recurring nightmare, many familiar slain faces now haunted the halls their clans called home once more. Mournful cries echoed from the families of the dead as mothers, fathers, wives and children came upon loved ones they had buried seasons past, now returned to them. Father, Father, speak to me, I beg thee, cried a young maiden named Iona, as she fell to her knees before the mute body of the warrior she had sung to sleep beneath the stones years prior. She reached out to clasp his hands, only to find them cold, though undeniably solid. Her father's piercing blue eyes that once lovingly gazed upon his child were now empty and fixed ahead with chilling vacancy. It was as if his spirit had returned to his earthly vessel. Yet his essence remained trapped behind a silent veil they could not breach. The inability to interact seemed not to dissuade many clansmen from attempting to resume old routines with the returned souls. Children whimpered and tugged at the plaids of dead siblings, wordlessly urging them to play games long abandoned. The cold touch of the grave remained ever present for those embracing their deceased kin. For a time, all thought of feuding was forgotten amidst the shared surreal torment. The Kilgarries endured the same dance with death within their shadowy halls. Loved ones whispered the names of the lost over and over, daring to hope that words might stir more than the aimless walking of the departed. As daylight illuminated the full scale of dead souls in their midst, Lagarth Kilgarry summoned his son and heir, Usdeen, to an emergency council. Never had their hallowed halls hosted so many ghosts while still drawing breath. Action must be taken if the uneasy peace was to continue holding. Across the glen, the same thought weighed upon the mind of Dunmore's chief, Aidan. Though tempers still burned hot from the war, curiosity and concern for the restless dead compelled the warring chiefs to broker a temporary meet at the ancient druid circle on neutral ground. Both sides agreed. No more blood could be shed until the walking dead were returned to rest. The circle's aged megaliths bore the encrusted ruins of nature's magics, generations older than any clan grudge. 2 druids accompanied their respective chieftains to the parley. For Ailsa and Bran, such a meeting sparkled with opportunity, held long forbidden. A chance for their kind to unite in common cause. I shall confess, Lagarth, in all my 60 winters, I have never witnessed such dark sorcery as that which now stalks our halls, declared Aidan, once convened around the centre stone. We may carry old hatreds, but this new threat proves greater than any feud. If we strike at one another now, all shall fall to shadow. Lagarth solemnly concurred, and turned his grizzled greys to Ailsa. What wisdom can you define of these restless spirits, lass? Can our protectors break whatever evil bewitchment holds their tongues hostage? Work with the druid and solve this, so we can get back to fighting. A tense silence fell, as all eyes shifted to the 2 druids, who served as protectors, healers, and counsel to their people since long before the clans first drew blades against one another. As soon as the chieftains departed, Ailsa and Bran regarded each other warily across the ancient altar stone. 4 seasons had passed since the druids last met, under a temporary truce to tend the most critically wounded on both sides. Even as they worked to save lives, Bran's clan had broken the accord once their warriors regained enough strength to resume the feud. Now, faced with this unnatural crisis, the 2 found themselves united in duty once more. This time, all futures depended upon their success. I shall attempt to summon their spirits for communing when the moon is highest tonight, stated Ailsa, breaking the tense silence between them. With fortune's blessing, we may learn what anchor holds them to this mortal realm. Though her words were steady, Bran noted traces of fear in her pale green eyes. He gave a solemn nod, tone softening, and I shall keep vigil by their decayed bodies in Dunmore Castle. But if the spirits do not answer your call, we must turn to older magics. Ailsa bristled slightly at the mention of what such magics could imply, but nodded in return. let us vow that whatever knowledge we uncover separately, we shall reconvene here on the morrow to share. She extended her hand towards him. Bran clasped her fingers with his own calloused ones and met her gaze with determination. I give you my solemn oath, by root and branch, that our tribe's hatreds shall not stand in the way of lifting this curse upon them. United in duty and purpose once more, the two druids vowed silently to rise to meet the shadowy threat, no matter the cost. True to their hidden vow, Elsa and Bran worked tirelessly over the next fortnight, seeking the source of the restless dead's return. They reconvened when they could spare a moment to share their findings, or lack thereof. Each night, Elsa invoked every banishing and containment ritual known to her order, desperate to give voice to the wordless spirits still wandering among the living. Yet try as she might to part the veil, the silence persisted. The dead would not talk. Meanwhile, Bran combed through every crumbling scroll their clan possessed for omens, portents, or tales of similar fairy mischief. As days passed largely fruitless, resentment slowly thawed between the two druids into a professional rapport and even fledgling camaraderie. In rare moments together, they found respite from the burden of expectations their clans and chieftains placed squarely upon their shoulders. A seed long suppressed between them began to shyly take root. Yet the deepening mystery and growing toll of unending vigilance never released its grip for long. The hearts joining between them would need to weather far darker revelations still. Elsa spent one long fruitless night trying vainly to give voice to the silent spirits still wandering Kilgarry halls. As dawn's light crept over the glen, desperate inspiration struck her. The burial vaults. Perhaps proximity to their vacant mortal shells would grant better fortune. She raced down into the underground tombs, weaving between the draped stones until she spotted one of the living spectres hovering aimlessly near a heavy memorial marker. Her own mother, Rhoda, long buried, yet now flesh once again. Heart aching, yet emboldened with possibility, Elsa extended her palms and spoke the sacred tongue to loosen unseen bindings upon the dead. The ritual words flowed as naturally as breath, while Rhoda slowly turned her hollow gaze upon her daughter. By branch and thorn, I break the bonds which choke your speech. Speak. Who has cursed you and all our fallen kin? At Elsa's question, Rhoda's parched lips creaked open, and a dusty rasp echoed forth. Ilsa, my babe, we walk still because of thee. The curse of the clans must be broken. Ilsa reeled back, stunned by her mother's sudden lucidity and cryptic words. Yet, before she could demand an explanation, Rhoda fell silent once more, the spell's potency fleeting. Her eyes resumed their vacant, lifeless gaze, though her body remained whole. Shaken, yet now alight with revelation, Ailsa raced to the standing stones to share this vital piece with the other soul bound to unraveling the curse. Bran. She found the Dunmore druid already awaiting her, his sleepless eyes mirroring her own, yet widening as she breathlessly recounted Rhoda's message. He grasped her shoulders firmly. My own divinations have illuminated little, yet I suspect foul ancient magics twisted our clan's blood hatred into this dark curse. Then we must uncover what original sin spawned such evil punishment. Ailsa whispered, through anxious knots tightening in her chest. What hand had she and their warring legacies unknowingly dealt to weave such a grim fate for their fallen? United by deepening dread, the two druids steeled themselves to unearth their intertwined pasts and the true forbidden seeds that flowered into the desecration of their dead. The harsh song of autumn winds echoed through the glen as Ailsa and Bran pored desperately over sagging parchment and threadbare tombs. The harsh song of autumn winds echoed through the glen as Ailsa and Bran pored desperately over sagging parchments. Another fruitless search for answers. Ailsa rose with a frustrated sigh, prepared to unleash her rage against the uncaring stone, when Bran halted her with a gentle touch. In his cobalt eyes, she found her own bone-deep weariness mirrored and given voice in his trembling whisper. We have always been but pawns bound by our tribes, my moonlight spirit, held apart by blood oaths not of our design. Yet, in this darkness, you alone are the hearth fire guiding my lost steps homeward. His calloused palm reached out to brush fiery strands from her cheek. She did not, could not, pull away. This tender communion was all that kept harsh fate's wolves beyond their sanctum's gate. So, at last, she gave herself over to what was surely destined ruin. Her mouth found his as stones and sky and all the old powers bore witness to their intermingling breath. Here, now, two battered souls swore union to carry their peoples from blight and shadow, or fall nobly in sacred defiance. The first kiss held the promise of forbidden tomorrows, bathed in glory or cataclysm. What future awaited could not sway their present course already set in motion. For in this moment, chained no longer were their destined hearts. In rare stolen moments, Bran and Ailsa found sanctuary in each other's arms. Their forbidden love, a lone beacon in the darkness. Yet, revelations waiting in the shadows could not be kept at bay indefinitely. During one late night's research, Bran uncovered ancient fragments linking their tribe's feud to corrupted blood magics, rituals meant to transcend earthly chaos and bind souls beyond this life. Twisted by mortal grievance into chains trapping spirits between worlds, but with understanding came hope. Bran and Ailsa gazed up at one another, spirits soaring as they grasped the knowledge of what must be done. To break the curse, our tribes must unlearn what centuries of bloodshed have carved into the very land, Ailsa whispered. Bran nodded, taking her hands reverently. The old binding rites were rooted in life, unity, and the eternal cycle. If our peoples vow to end all vengeance, if we consecrate our union as the ancients first intended, new oaths, rooted in love, shall stalk the dark magics and restore the fallen to their eternal rest. As heir to the ancient arts, the druids finally glimpsed the path that could cut short this torment. But would their war-torn kin be willing to sacrifice so much pride and hate to reclaim lost souls even death would no longer claim? A renewed spark of hope ignited in Ailsa and Bran's hearts, kindled by the promise of ending their clan's torment. If only pride and hatred could be made to kneel before desperation's petition. The druids parted ways to cautiously broach reconciliation's possibility with their wary kin. But fate, ever cruel, lashed back against this defiant flame. In a moonlight glen of sacred stones, their chaste farewell kiss was glimpsed by a Kilgari scout on routine patrol. By next dawn, venomous rumor of the druid's forbidden tryst roared through both camps. All thoughts of peace burned up in rekindled fury. Ailsa faced her chieftain's blistering accusations of unforgivable betrayal, just barely quelling the clan's bloodlust for her head. Meanwhile, across the glen, Bran endured whippings as bitter penance for his treachery. In the end, the warring tribes would hear no talk of ending old curses or sacrifices. Too deep. Even with salvation for their haunted clans finally grasped, the thirst for vengeance yet eclipsed all sense of reason. Pride and rage made beasts of men once more. And Ailsa and Bran could only steal a mournful glance between them across the widening gulf, their dream of deliverance receding into wind and ash. Ailsa and Bran's desperate plea for peace fell upon deaf ears, hardened by endless cycles of retribution. Their cautious spark of hope was cruelly smothered beneath proud raging fires, now burning hotter than ever within both camps. Accusations turned swiftly back into steel as Dunmore and Kilgarry warriors marshalled with murderous intent across blood-soaked fields. All thought of lifting curses faded beneath boiling crimson tides of war. Kin long departed and newly mourned braced to receive fresh souls into their tortured ranks. As battle erupted with unprecedented ferocity, the land itself seemed to cry out in anguish. Wind and rain lashed exposed skin, already streaked with gore, as the feast of violence raged on. Iron sang a vicious cadence to the sounds of warrior fury unleashed. For how could there be thoughts of salvation when all hearts nursed vengeance as a suckling babe? In helpless dismay, Ailsa raised her staff to the sky, begging lightning to shock sense into their maddened brains. Yet, Bran held back his own storm-wielding gift, jaw set with solemn resolve. Even as his clan pressed the advantage his magics granted them. The time had come at last to break the wretched cycle staining their shared history, whatever salvation's final cost. As battle raged on, Bran observed his clansmen cutting a ruthless path towards decisive victory. The power behind his wind and lightning spells fueled Dunmore's merciless advance. Just for a heartbeat, triumph blazed within reach to finally crush their hated foes. Yet, the brief image of Ailsa's anguished face flashed across Bran's mind, stealing his nerve. With a last longing look at his oblivious kin, he whispered an incantation to move unseen into Kilgary's flank. If he could not sway hearts, perhaps one last betrayal could break the wheel crushing them all. With silent apology, Bran summoned an icy spell against exposed Dunmore backs. His clansmen cried out in shock and outrage at the freak storm, halting their advance. Ailsa lifted her head to behold the impossible tempest, then locked eyes with its solemn caster from across the churning field. In sad understanding passed between two druids now completely alone, Bran offered a single nod. After this day, no others need ever suffer such torment at the hands of their tribe's blood feud. The end was upon them both, come what may. With peace now a forever dream scattered by driving sleet, Bran strode forth serenely to accept the fate he had carved for himself, and cut short his people's lust for vengeance in the process. Bran's betrayal ignited Dunmore fury into an inferno. They descended upon him with curses, flying as freely as sharpened steel. He made no move to halt their advance, nor raise hand against the family-turned-executioners, advancing upon their wayward son. The end came swiftly upon blood-slick stones, even as his clansmen's blades pierced his yielding flesh, and their ultimate act of vengeance fulfilled. Bran's thoughts drifted towards Ailsa one last time. Whatever lay beyond the veil for them both, may this final sacrifice at least purchase some measure of peace for her war-torn spirit. May she take comfort in the completion of their forbidden love's cruel destiny, written in the stars and ancient oaths. Ailsa watched in mute horror as Bran's broken body slid limply off harsh, unforgiving steel into the scarlet mud. A wrenching scream tore from her throat as winter storm secured the Dunmore's maddening threat from their battlefield. She raced desperately through driving sleet to where her beloved lay crumpled and gasping faintly amidst crimson pools. Collapsing at his side, with flames reduced to ash and smoke, she cradled Bran close until the light left his empty traitor's eyes. She cradled Bran close until the light left his empty eyes. No truce left to violate, no peace left to be found that could wash clean their cursed clan's stain. Bran's broken body lay limp upon blood-slickened stones. His spirit fled to realms beyond Ailsa's reach. Her anguished wails echoed across the now silent battlefield. scattered with the gruesome remnants of their tribe's mutual destruction and fresh reasons for vengeance. In the battle's aftermath, Clan Kilgarry emerged battered, yet standing. What remained of Clan Dunmore retreated to nurse their wounds and fractured pride. In the weeks after, an eerie shift rippled through Kilgarry halls. The tide of risen dead slowly began to ebb at last. Newly departed souls no longer tread back beyond the veil to haunt the living. Some whispered Bran's sacrifice had begun to weaken the blood curse's fury. Others awaited the day their enemies would surely return to finish the task. Amidst the funeral calm, muted gatehouse cries one grey morning heralded a wretched handful of Dunmore guards staggering through the mist toward enemy Kilgarry lands. And shuffling among them, with empty, haunted eyes, was Bran's familiar visage, now just as pale and tortured as his fellow restless, cursed dead. Ailsa drifted through the halls like a ghost herself, numbly performing rituals more out of dread than any hope of solace. The curse may have begun receding thanks to Bran's sacrifice, but her own hollow heart persisted in its own private agony. When the last of the dead first shambled through Kilgarry's gates, Ailsa's breath caught at the thought Bran might return among them. And late afternoon shadows stretched long before she finally glimpsed his beloved face hovering at the rear procession. She froze, the torch in her hand clattering to the floor. Those who witnessed later swore the druid let loose an unearthly cry, unlike any heard in those halls before. A sound to pierce the veil itself. My warrior, my soul's own heart, Ailsa whispered through joyous anguish. She drifted forward until mere breaths kept her lips from his. This close, only the faded glint of honouring woad paint distinguished handsome Bran from his fellow condemned. She reached to cradle the cold, too solid flesh of his face, as if the most precious treasure now restored across eternities. In reply, those empty grey eyes, once holding entire cosmos glimpsed in secret just for her, could summon not a flicker. No final words passed Bran's sealed mouth to heal relentless demons howling still within Ailsa's fraying mind. Ailsa awoke the next dawn with Bran's image still seared into her heart, mind and soul. Though her remaining clansmen began allowing themselves cautious breaths of relief, the druid knew no true salvation could exist with her beloved still trapped. in endless unrest. She travelled to the stone circles where they first began unravelling the blood curse together, what now felt like eons past. If Bran's spirit could not find its way to the gods' halls, then she must breach the veil herself to ferry him across. Drawing Bran's lingering spirit to the circle, she commanded he join hands with her, summoned by rune-etched megaliths. You bound yourself in service to all future peace between our tribes reborn, my eternal love, she intoned through bitter-sweet tears. I bind myself to you now, he who I would choose above clan, kin, or breath itself. Weaving the most ancient negotiation rites, she at last uttered words to unlock Bran's damned essence from its fleshy chains. His ashen lips creaked slowly. The assembled host wept and shouted praise as Bran's beloved rumbling voice echoed once more. With the curse nearly broken, he had strength for 3 words alone before the abyss reclaimed him forevermore. Yet 3 words proved enough to seal fervent agreement between 2 hearts' fate never permitted to freely join in life. Bran sighed, finally unfettered, if only for precious heartbeats span. He muttered, I love thee. In bygone days, there lived a little princess named Gold Tree, and she was one of the prettiest children in the whole world. Although her mother was dead, she had a very happy life, for her father loved her dearly and thought that nothing was too much trouble so long as it gave his little daughter pleasure. But by and by, he married again, and then the little princess's sorrows began. For you see, his new wife, whose name, curious to say, was Silver Tree. She was very beautiful, but she was also very jealous, and she made herself quite miserable for fear that someday she should meet someone who was better looking than she was herself. And when she found that her stepdaughter was so very pretty, she took quite a dislike to her at once, and was always looking at her and wondering if people would think her prettier than she was. And because, in her heart of hearts, she was afraid that they would do so, she was very unkind indeed to the poor girl. At last, one day, when Princess Goldtree was quite grown up, the 2 ladies went for a walk. to a little well which lay, all surrounded by trees, in the middle of a deep glen. Now, the water in this well was so clear that everyone who looked into it saw his face reflected on the surface. And the proud queen loved to come and peep into its depths, so, of course, that she could see her own picture mirrored in the water. But today, as she was looking in, what should she see but a little trout, which was swimming quietly backwards and forwards, not very far from the surface. "Troutie, Troutie, answer me this one question," said the queen. "Am I not the most beautiful woman in the world?" "No, indeed you are not," replied the trout, promptly jumping out of the water as he spoke in order to swallow a fly. "Well then, who is the most beautiful woman then?" asked the disappointed queen, for she had expected a far different answer. "Thy stepdaughter, the Princess Goldtree, without a doubt," said the little fish. Then, frightened by the black look that came upon the jealous queen's face, he dived to the bottom of the well. And it was no wonder that he did so, for the queen's expression was not pleasant to look at, as she darted an angry glance at her fair young stepdaughter, who was busy picking flowers just a little distance away. Indeed, she was so annoyed at the thought that anyone should say that the girl was prettier than she was, that she quite lost her self-control. And when she reached home, she went up in a violent passion to her room and threw herself on the bed, declaring that she felt very ill indeed. It was in vain that Princess Goldtree asked her what the matter was, and if she could do anything for her. She would not let the poor girl touch her, but pushed her away as if she had been some evil thing. So, at last the princess had to leave her alone and go out of the apartment, feeling very sad indeed. By and by, the king came home from his hunting, and he at once asked for the queen. He was told that she had been seized with a sudden illness, and that she was lying on her bed in her own room, and that no one, not even the court physician, who had been hastily summoned, could make out what was wrong with her. In great anxiety, for he really loved her, the king went up to her bedside and asked the queen how she felt, and if there was anything at all that he could do to relieve her. "Yes, there is one thing that you could do," she answered harshly. "But I know full well that even although it is the only thing that will cure me, you will not do it." "No," said the king. I deserve better words at your mouth than these, for you know well that I would give you anything you care to ask, even if it be half of my kingdom. Then, give me your daughter's heart to eat, cried the queen. For unless I can obtain that, I will die, and that speedily. She spoke so wildly and looked at him in such a strange fashion that the poor king really thought that her brain was turned, and he was at his wits' end. He left the room, and he paced up and he paced down the corridor in great distress, until at last he remembered that that very morning the son of a great king had arrived from a country far over the sea, asking for his daughter's hand in marriage. Here is a way out of this difficulty, he said to himself. This marriage pleases me well, and I will have it celebrated at once. Then, when my daughter is safe out of the country, I will send a lad up to the hillside, and he shall kill a goat, and I will have its heart prepared and dressed, and send it up to my wife. Perhaps the sight of it will cure her of this madness. So, he had this strange prince summoned before him, and told him how the queen had taken a sudden illness and had wrought on her brain, and had caused her to take a dislike to the princess, and how it seemed as if it would be a good thing if, with the maiden's consent, the marriage could take place at once, so that the queen might be left alone to recover from her strange disease. Now, the prince was delighted to gain his bride so easily, and the princess was glad to escape from her stepmother's hatred, so the marriage took place at once, and the newly wedded pair set off across the sea for the prince's country. Then the king sent a lad up to the hillside to kill a goat, and when it was killed, he gave orders that its heart should be dressed and cooked and sent to the queen's apartment on a silver dish. And the wicked woman tasted it, believing it to be the heart of her stepdaughter. When she had done so, she rose from her bed and went about the castle looking as well and hearty as ever. I'm glad to be able to tell you that the marriage of Princess Goldtree, which had come about in such a hurry, turned out to be a great success. For the prince whom she had wedded was rich and great and powerful, and he loved her dearly, and she was as happy as the day was long. So things went peacefully on for about a year. Queen Silvertree was satisfied and contented because she thought her stepdaughter was dead. while all the time the princess was happy and prosperous in her new home. But at the end of the year, it chanced that the queen went once more to the well in the little glen, in order to see her face reflected in the water. And it chanced also that the same little trout was swimming backwards and forwards, just as he had done the year before. And the foolish queen was determined to have a better answer to a question this time than she had last. "Trouty, Trouty," she whispered, leaning over the edge of the well, "am I not the most beautiful woman in the world?" "By my troth, you are not," answered the trout in his very straightforward way. "Who is the most beautiful woman then?" asked the queen, her face growing pale at the thought that she had yet another rival. "Why, your Majesty's stepdaughter, the Princess Goldtree, to be sure," answered the trout. The queen threw back her head with a sigh of relief. "Well, at any rate, people cannot admire her now," she said, "for it is a year since she died. I ate her heart for my supper." "Can you be sure of that, your Majesty?" asked the trout, with a little twinkle in his eye. "Methinks it is but a year since she married the gallant young prince who came from abroad to seek her hand, and returned with him to his own country." When the queen heard these words, she turned quite cold with rage, for she knew that her husband had deceived her. And she rose from her knees and went straight home to the palace, and hiding her anger as best she could, she asked him if he would give orders to have the long ship made ready, as she wished to go and visit her dear stepdaughter, for it was such a very long time since she had seen her. The king was somewhat surprised at her request, but he was only too glad to think that she had got over her hatred towards his daughter, and he gave orders that the long ship should be made ready at once. And soon it was speeding over the water, its prow turned in the direction of the land where the princess lived, steered by the queen herself, for she knew the course that the boat ought to take, and she was in such a haste to be at her journey's end that she would allow no one else to take the helm. Now it chanced that Princess Goldtree was alone that very day, for her husband had gone hunting, and as she looked out of one of the castle windows, she saw a boat sailing over the sea towards the landing place. She recognized it as her father's longship. She guessed only too well whom it carried on board. She was almost beside herself with terror at the thought, for she knew that it was for no good purpose that Queen Silvertree had taken the trouble to set out to visit her. And she felt that she would have given almost anything she possessed if her husband had been at home. In her distress, she hurried into the servants' hall. "Oh, what shall I do? What shall I do?" she cried. "For I see my father's long ship coming over the sea, and I know that my stepmother is on board. And if she has a chance, she will kill me, for she hates me more than anything else upon earth." Now the servants worshipped the ground that the young mistress trod on. She was always kind and considerate to them. And when they saw how frightened she was and heard her pietous words, they crowded round her as if to shield her from any harm that threatened her. "Do not be afraid, Your Highness," they cried. "We will defend thee with our very lives if need be. But in case the lady stepmother should have the power to throw any evil spell over you, we will lock you in the great mullioned chamber. Then she cannot get you at all." Now the mullioned chamber was a strong room, which was in a part of the castle all by itself, and its door was so thick that no one could possibly break through it. And the princess knew that if she were once inside the room, with its stout oaken door between her and her stepmother, she would be perfectly safe from any mischief that the wicked woman could devise. So she consented to her faithful servants and allowed them to lock her in the mullioned chamber. So it came to pass, when Queen Silvertree arrived at the great door of the castle and commanded the lackey who opened it to take her to the royal mistress, he told her with a low bow that that was impossible, because the princess was locked in the strong room of the castle and could not get out, because no one knew where the key was, which was quite true. For you see, the old butler had tied it round the neck of the prince's favourite sheepdog and had sent him away to the hills to seek his master. "Take me to the door of the apartment," commanded the queen. "At least I can speak to my dear daughter through it." And the lackey, who did not see what harm could possibly come from this, did as he was bid. "If the key is really lost, and you cannot come out to welcome me, dear Gold Tree," said the deceitful queen, at least put your little finger through the keyhole, that I may kiss it." The princess did so, never dreaming that evil could come to her through such a simple action. But it did. For instead of kissing the tiny finger, her stepmother stabbed it with a poisoned needle. And so deadly was the poison, and before she could utter a single cry, the poor princess fell, as one dead on the floor. When she heard the fall, a smile of satisfaction crept over the Queen's Silver Tree's face. Now, I can say that I am the most beautiful woman in the world. And she went back to the lackey, who stood waiting at the end of the passage, and told him that she had said all that she wanted to say to her daughter, and that now she must return home. So the man attended to her and sent her to the boat with all due ceremony, and she set sail again for her own country. And no one in the castle knew that any harm had befallen the dear mistress until the prince came home from his hunting with the key of the chamber. He laughed when he heard the story of Queen Silvertree's visit, and he told the servants that they had done very well. Then he ran upstairs to open the door and release his wife. But what was his horror and dismay when he did so, to find her lying dead at his feet on the floor. He was nearly beside himself with rage and grief, and because he knew that a deadly poison such as Queen Silvertree had used would preserve the princess's body so that it had no need of burial, he had it laid on a silken couch and left in the chamber, so that he could go and look at her whenever he pleased. He was so terribly lonely. However, in a little time he married again, and his second wife was just as sweet and as good as the first one had been. This new wife was very happy. There was only one little thing that caused her any trouble at all, and she was too sensible to let it make her miserable. That one thing was that there was one room in the castle, a room which stood at the end of a passage by itself, which she could never enter, as her husband always carried the key, and as when she asked him the reason of this, he always made an excuse of some kind. She made up her mind that she would not seem as if she did not trust him, and so she asked no more questions about the matter. But one day, the prince chanced to leave the door unlocked, and as he had never told her not to do so, she went in, and there she saw Princess Goldtree lying on the silken couch, looking as if she were asleep. "Is she dead, or is she only sleeping?" she said to herself. And she went up to the couch and looked closely at the princess. And there, sticking in her little finger, she discovered a curiously shaped needle. There has been evil work here, she thought to herself. If that needle be not poisoned, then I know nothing of medicine. And being skilled in leechcraft, she drew it out very carefully. And then, in a moment, Princess Goldtree opened her eyes and sat up. And presently, she had recovered sufficiently to tell the other princess the whole story. Now, if her stepmother had been jealous, the other princess was not jealous at all. For when she heard all that had happened, she clapped her little hands, crying, "Oh, how glad the prince will be! For although he has married again, I know that he loves you best." That night, the prince came home from hunting, looking very tired and sad indeed. For what his second wife had said was quite true. Although he loved her very much, he was always mourning in his heart for his first dear love, Princess Goldtree. "How sad you are," exclaimed his wife, going out to meet him. "Is there nothing that I can do to bring a smile to your face?" "Nothing," answered the prince wearily, laying down his bow, for he was too heartsore even to pretend to be happy. "Except to give you back Goldtree," said his wife mischievously, "and that I can do. You will find her alive and well in the chamber." And without a word, the prince ran upstairs, and sure enough, there was his dear Goldtree, sitting on the couch, ready to welcome him. He was so overjoyed to see her that he threw his arms round her neck and kissed her over and over again, quite forgetting his poor second wife, who had followed him upstairs, and who now stood watching the meeting that she had brought about. She did not seem to be sorry for herself, however. "I always knew that your heart yearned after Princess Goldtree," she said, "and it is but right that it should be so. For she was your first love, and since she has come to life again, I will go back to my own people." "No, indeed you will not," answered the prince, "for it is you who has brought me this joy. You will stay with us, and we shall all three live happily together. And Goldtree and you will become great friends." And so it came to pass, for Princess Goldtree and the other princess soon became like sisters, and loved each other as if they had been brought up together all their lives. In this manner, another year passed away, And one evening, in the old country, Queen Silvertree went, as she had done before, to look at her face in the water of the little well in the glen. And, as had happened twice before, the trout was there. "Troutie, Troutie," she whispered, "am I not the most beautiful woman in the world?" "By my troth, you are not," answered the trout, as he had answered on the 2 previous occasions. "And who do you say is the most beautiful woman now?" asked the queen, her voice trembling with rage and vexation. "I have given her a name to you these 2 years back," answered the trout. "The Princess Goldtree, of course." "But she is dead," laughed the queen. "I am sure of it this time, for it is just a year since I stabbed her little finger with a poisoned needle, and I heard her fall down dead on the floor." "I would not be so sure of that," answered the trout, and without saying another word, he dived straight down to the bottom of the well. After hearing his mysterious words, the queen could not rest, and at last she asked her husband to have the longship prepared once more, so that she could go and see her stepdaughter. The king gave the order gladly, and it all happened as it had happened once before. She steered the ship over the sea with her own hands, and when it was approaching the land, it was seen and recognized by Princess Goldtree. The prince was out hunting, of course, and the princess ran in great terror to her friend, the other princess, who was upstairs in her chamber. "Oh, what shall I do? What shall I do?" she cried. "For I see my father's longship coming, and I know that my cruel stepmother is on board, and she will try to kill me, as she tried to kill me before. Oh, come, let us escape to the hills." "Not at all," replied the other princess, throwing her arms around the trembling Goldtree. "I am not afraid of this lady stepmother. Come with me, and we will go down to the seashore to greet her." So, they both went down to the edge of the water, and when Queen Silvertree saw her stepdaughter coming, she pretended to be very glad, and sprang out of the boat and ran to meet her, and held out a silver goblet full of wine for her to drink. "This is a rare wine from the East," she said, "and therefore very precious. I brought a flagon with me so that we might pledge each other in a loving cup." Princess Goldtree, who was ever gentle and courteous, would have stretched out her hand for the cup, had not the other princess stepped between her and her stepmother. "No, madam," she said gravely, looking the queen straight in the face. "It is the custom in this land for the one who offers a loving cup to drink from it first herself "I will follow the custom gladly," answered the queen, and she raised the goblet to her mouth. But the other princess, who was watching her very closely, noticed that she did not allow the wine that it contained to touch her lips. So she stepped forward and, as if by accident, struck the bottom of the goblet with her shoulder. Part of its contents flew into the queen's face, and part, before she could shut her mouth, went down her throat. So, because of her wickedness, she was, as the good book says, caught in her own net. For she had made the wine so poisonous that almost before she had swallowed it, she fell dead at the two princesses' feet. No one was sorry for her, for she really deserved her fate, and they buried her hastily in a lonely piece of ground. Very soon, everybody had forgotten all about her. As for Princess Goldtree, she lived happily and peacefully with her husband and her friend for the remainder of her life. Off the rugged northern shores of Scotland lies the treacherous strait known as the Minch, where unpredictable storms can arise without warning. For centuries, fishermen crossing these perilous waters told tales of the mystical creatures known as the Blue Men of Minch. But who were these strange sea spirits, and why did they haunt the sailors of the Minch? According to legend, the Blue Men were the last survivors of a tribe who once dwelled on the shores of the Minch in ages past. They were said to be descendants of fallen angels, cast out from heaven after the great battle between Lucifer and God. When the defeated angels plunged into the sea, their celestial bodies turned from radiant white to a deep, deep blue. It was said their clan lived peacefully for generations, subsisting on fish and seabirds. But after many years, violence and corruption infected their once pure community. Seeing the degradation of his people, their chieftain appealed to an ancient sea goddess to redeem them. Enraged at their sins, the goddess conjured up a catastrophic storm to punish the wayward tribe. Massive waves crashed over the land, flooding it for leagues and drowning all in their holes of stone. Only a handful survived. Now transformed into spiritual creatures and condemned to patrol the minch for eternity. The last of these remnants became the blue men of Minch. Their skin, hair and eyes stained the same deep indigo of the stormy sea. Those sparing sailors who showed respect for their waters, they would summon vengeful tempests to destroy any who defied them. Sailors who survived deadly minch squalls swore the blue men had judged them unworthy and sought to consign them to the depths. As guardians of the strait, the blue men would appear during violent storms or if trouble brewed beneath the waves. Often, they approached vessels disguised as sailors, offering to bring luck for a passage. But it is said their true motive was assessing if the crew treated the sea with humility or disregard. By tradition, the blue men challenged sailors they deemed insolent or reckless with riddles, then conjured a lethal storm if the answers displeased them. Any who could outwit the blue men proved themselves honourable seafarers and won safe passage. So, the spectral guardians lingered, bound to their timeless duty, judging sailors and serving grim justice to any who disrespected their domain. In the mist-veiled glens and villages of Scotland, forces unseen have long conspired to alter the fates of men. The grown, gathering herbs may wield uncanny powers beyond mortal ken. When misfortune strikes, when sickness or strife befall a family, some hidden hand must be blamed. Thus was born the witch lore of Scotland, nourished and emboldened under King James's reign, when dread of those who commune with spirits ran rampant, while pious men deny all magic save God's. An older, pagan fear of the preternatural yet lingers. For witches can, it is whispered, cast enchantments to bless or curse, soothe or kill, bind wills to their command. Small wonder they are both feared and sought after in secret. Charms to repel strange knots in the wood, or keep black cats from crossing one's path, or protect fishermen on restless seas. Who can say these may not guard against darker forces plotting mischief? Let home and hearth be well guarded, for somewhere in the shadowed glen an eerie cackle echoes, as those claimed by the witch fever root out some new threat. The cunning woman they condemn may not know perfumes to restore health or bestow fortune, yet they see only an instrument of evil. But in the end, all are subject to forces beyond control, be they earthly or otherwise. For now, the weary take comfort in simple rituals to ward off turmoil wrought by hands or powers unseen. While the villagers sleep, something stirs in the gloom beyond the fire's light. A curse, a blessing, or merely the wind. Such mysteries kindle both imagination and dread. In the land of heather and mist, there was once a family on an island in Uist. They were farm people and worked hard all year. But when the harvest was over and the grain tucked safely away for the frosty months ahead, they took it upon themselves to plan a little trip to Lewis, to visit some friends there. It was the same every year. They crossed the sea and got to Lewis, where they had a grand time of it. And then they went home again, to cozy themselves away for the long frosty months. And so it was this time that they gathered an able crew and set off. At Lewis, things seemed much the same as they ever had. The man of the family went to greet the woman of the house they were visiting, and they talked for many hours of days of old and of good friends and family. And just as he made preparations to get off to bed, a tall woman entered the room with hair as black as a raven's back. Her eyes were cool and dark, and she whispered something to the woman of the house, and then she left, stopping only to stroke the woman's hair. "Who's that ugly black thing?" asked the man, curious about how familiar the two women were. And the woman sighed, and she replied, "Is that what you say? Ugly, is she? Woe betide you, man, but you'll be lost in love with her before you leave Lewis. If you can, of course." And with that, she rose and went off to bed. Now the man scowled with the thought of it, for he had 3 great strong bairns and a lovely wife, as fair and pink and white as this thing was black. Indeed, he muttered to himself, I won't fall in love with her. He spat a bit of old tobacco into the iron sink and prepared to retire himself. And so he rose in the morning, and the first thing that ate at his mind was the thought of that tall girl, with hair as black as a raven's back. And then he went downstairs, stormy as the North Sea waters. That night the girl came again to the house, though she'd not been out of his mind since her last visit, and he hated her even more. All tall and black, with those cool dark eyes. But when she left, he longed for her like he'd longed for no other, and he grew black himself with rage and desire. Now this went on every day for a week, with the man growing silent and cold. So his wife felt afraid and begged him to take leave of that house. We've had a good visit now, and it's time for us to be making our way home, she said firmly to her husband, and with the last tiny shred of rational thought left in his mind, which longed for the tall girl with hair as black as a raven's back, he agreed. And so it was that their belongings were packed, and the big strong boat made good, and they arrived at the sea to leave. But as the first foot was set inside that big boat, a great black gale was brewed and flung at them, and they could go no further. There was nothing for it but to return to the house from which they'd come, and to that tall woman. And so again the next morning they set out, but the mists drew around them, cool and dark, and they could go no further. There was nothing for it but to return to the house from which they'd come, and to the cool dark eyes of that woman. But as they walked away from the coast, they met a wee old witch, with hair that was whiter than the down of a thistle, and a small wrinkled face that spoke of great wisdom. And she stopped them there and beckoned them aside. "Well, my good folks," she said, you've a bit of trouble leaving this dark place?" They nodded and listened intently. "Well, it's no wonder," said the wee old witch, "seeing the kind of place you've been staying. What will you give me for fine weather to go tomorrow?" "Anything. Anything we'll give to you," said the wife earnestly, and looked to her husband. But his eyes were trained on the hill, on the house with the tall woman with the cool dark eyes, and his face was rent by a longing such as she'd never seen before. "We'll do anything," she said again firmly. "A pound of snuff," said the old witch. "And I'll need to have word with the skipper. Send him by this evening." And with that she showed them to the door. So later that night, the skipper of the big strong boat was sent to see the old witch. And there she handed him a rope with 3 big knots. "Here you are," she said. "You take this aboard, and you'll have a good day for sailing tomorrow. It'll not be long before you're at Lewis Harbour. Now, if you haven't enough wind, just open one of these knots. And then, if that is not enough still, untie the second. But whatever you do, by God, whatever you do not untie the 3rd knot." And so it happened that on that next morning, the day dawned clear and bright, with a fresh puff of wind to set them on their course. They loaded the boat, and without a backward glance, they headed to sea. And the man of the family let out a sigh of relief, so long and so frenzied that the others averted their eyes. His thoughts were once again pure, and the magic of that old witch had set him free. He called to the skipper. "Untie a knot," he said grandly. "Let's get us home at once." And so, a knot was untied on the rope, and a swift breeze blew up that sent them cutting through the waves. "And again," he cried, the wind cold on his body, his soul cleansed and clear. And another knot was untied, so that a great wind was let loose on the tiny ship, and they flew across the water now. The sails stretched to the limit. And the man of the family settled himself on deck, and with the sea air licking his face, he felt safe from all danger, and perhaps a little too confident, for he called out then, "Let's test that old woman's magic. What means that third knot?" And his crew cowered away from him, and his wife shook her head. But he insisted, and being the man of the family, and in charge of his boat, and his own fate, he had his way, and the knot was untied. What happened then is a story for the ears of the fearless only. For from the sea rose a sight that clamped shut the mouths of the men, and the wife, and their children, until their dying day. It was a shape, tall, very tall, with a face of sorts, from which shone cold, dark eyes. And a hand reached down, and the man of the family plucked from amongst them and cast into the sea. And then the boat itself was lifted high above the waves and placed on their home island, from where she'd never move again. She's still there to this day, a warning to all who think that magic can be tested. And the land there has come to be called Port Ilin Nakula, or Port of the Island of the Boat. Deep in the heart of Scotland, the district of Badenoch stretches from Loch Lagan to Cairngorm. Not far from the source of Spey, the farm of Lagan is central in Badenoch, sitting in the shade of Mark na Craig. It is a peaceful place now, except for the traffic of the A86 and the chatter of visitors from the centres of Aviemore and Newton Mourne. But it was not always so. A long time ago, Lagan was the home of a lady known as Bain na Lagan, wife of Lagan, who had the reputation of being a witch. Nowadays, it is possible to laugh at such an estimation. But in the past, which was an object of genuine fear. Superstition was rife, based on a mixture of ignorance and ancient beliefs, warped by half-remembered knowledge. Amongst this lived a people naturally imaginative, laced with individuals blessed with powers denied to most. In a land where lochs could host water horses, seas concealed mermaids, and standing stones evoked powerful images from the past, was witchcraft so unimaginable? The wife of Lagan lived in a state of continuous feud with her neighbours. In the next town, and when the nearest crofter found the wife's sheep loose among his fields, he was not surprised. Angrily, he penned them, refusing to give them back to the wife until she paid for the damage they had caused. This backfired, for the wife began a campaign of attrition against the crofter. A series of misfortunes drove the man out of Badenoch, and as he left he muttered about the great black cat which had plagued him. For a while the croft remained empty, but others in the township suffered the wrath of the wife. With animals sickening, crops failing, and minor accidents becoming too commonplace to be coincidence, at length the township fought fire with fire, as one Donald Bain took over the vacant croft. Donald was a bit of a witch himself, of the white variety, and he knew what measures could counter the wife's attacks. Bog fur tied to the tail, or horn of a cow protected the animal from sorcery, while an iron horseshoe or a rowan branch tied to the shape of a cross could be placed above a door or window to deny access to anything evil. With the building secure and animals safe, the folk of the town could breathe easier. But there was still a black cat creeping around. Hens and eggs were still vanishing. It was not practical in those free-ranging days to keep all the fowl indoors. Donald, however, had the answer. Melting a spoon for silver, Donald moulded a bullet and went hunting for the cat. A sighting, a quick shot followed by a very human scream. And when next seen, the wife of Lagan was limping. She also knew how dangerous her opponent was. Autumn came early to Badenoch, bringing rain from the west. Working at the summer shieling, Donald was at his fireside, drying his clothes, when a black hen fluttered to his feet. This was no part of his, so Donald blessed himself. Gradually the hen grew larger, altering shape, until it became the wife of Lagan, crouching by Donald's fire. On the opposite side of the flames, Donald's dogs growled and snarled, hackles rising. But they were too well trained to attack, unless ordered. Not knowing this, the wife was nervous and asked Donald to tie them. "I'm sorry," Donald replied, shaking his head. "But I've no rope." The wife pulled out some of her long hair and suggested he use that instead. Wary of the wife, Donald appeared to tie back his dogs, but instead fastened the hair round his coat sleeve. Sure of the success of her plan, the wife attacked him, screaming, "Tightened hair, cut and strangle." Instead of choking the dogs, the hair tightened round Donald's coat. When the dogs saw their master in danger, they leaped on the wife, throwing her to the polished earth floor. She screamed, struggled, and ran, with both dogs snapping at her. Donald remained in the shieling all night, only leaving when dawn arrived. There was a dead dog on the track, choked by a piece of bloody flesh in its mouth. Other men of the township joined Donald and told him that the wife was dying. Donald's dogs had gnawed and bitten her so badly that she would not survive long. One by one, the crofters joined Donald as he walked to Lagan. But they remained at the door as he entered the witch's farm. They took the body of the witch to the top of the knoll, and there they burned it. That knoll, Witch Hill, was marked by nature. From now until this day, no trees grow above the ashes of the wife of Lagan.